got a hold of it. No doubt about it. The kid hits it back in the bullpen. A drive in the gap to left center field. There's nobody there.
Sometimes you have to go far away from your dreams just to realize how badly you actually want them. Mumford, Texas is about as far away as you can get from the baseball spotlight, and a hard life for anyone who takes up this line.
It's pretty tough. You take your life savings and gamble it every year, then hoping to get it back. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't.
This is the story of one farmer who took the biggest gamble of his life on himself and won. But long before that, this is the story of a country boy who put aside his baseball dreams in the middle of his career just to see if he was meant to be elsewhere.
This is where Grady farmed, runs back here behind us and runs all the way over to where you see that house and those trees. And he raised mostly cotton. He tried to raise some cows out here one year, and that wasn't real successful for him, so he went back to cotton.
Yes, Grady Little, the man who now finds himself as a leading man near Hollywood, once led the cows to pasture by the Brazos River bottom.
Grady worked real hard. He really tried hard, but his heart was always with baseball. I saw him one time sit on a tractor, I know for over 24 hours straight, so that he could take off the next afternoon to go watch a baseball game. Baseball has been his life.
This is his life. This is Grady Little before the bigs. William Grady Little was born in Abilene, Texas on March 30th, 1950. The third of 6 children born to Bill and Dorothy Little.
Oh, I just remember he was so cute. He really was. Of course, I was old enough that I got to hold him, of course. And it didn't take my sister Becky and I long to realize that he was pretty important to my dad.
What Bill Little saw in his firstborn son was a chance to pass along his love for the game of baseball. A love that almost saw him fulfill his own dreams.
He was a player. He played in the minor leagues for the Cubs before he had an injury to his ankle, and it kind of curtailed his career a little bit, and he had to start raising 6 kids. But he worked very hard the rest of his life, but just because he couldn't play at the very highest level, it didn't stop him from trying to persuade us that was the best game in the world.
The minute he saw Dad, boy, he was ready to play. Because my dad traveled, he was a truck driver, and so when he came home, well, Grady, he was raring to go. So my dad had to play.
We didn't play the game to kind of play it. We were actually hearing the inside-out part of baseball at an early age.
As the family moved downstate to Houston, the Little boys continued to blossom, especially the eldest, who was a leader on the field from the very start.
I think Grady began his managing career even as a child. He was a catcher. You know, early on, I think Grady did a little pitching, and my dad knew that his ticket with his hands and his savvy behind the plate was catching.
As Grady was finishing up his freshman year, his father was asked to transfer to the Southeast region. After looking at several cities, the Littles settled on Charlotte for its growth and its baseball.
It was a big baseball area at that point in time. There were like 50 minor league teams around the state of North Carolina, and we were going to be right in the middle of it there, and I think that had a lot to do with my dad's decision to go there in the first place.
Charlotte native Eddie Hill remembers meeting the new kid who came to town with a Texas twang and a love for baseball.
We were very close, a couple miles apart. We would get together and play ball. Back in those days, it was pre-video games. So basically our pastime was playing baseball. And barring some kind of a storm, we were going to be playing baseball.
The Little household was a stone's throw from Garinger High School. Built in 1959, it was state-of-the-art at the time and a perfect fit for Grady.
Garinger was a baseball powerhouse in the Charlotte area. I know it's gone down now over the years, and I hate to see it, but the tradition there was winning.
We had good ball teams, and we got into the state playoffs a time or two there, but I wasn't anything special. I could catch and throw, and in high school, that's probably where I peaked out as a hitter.
Grady was a guy who had to work for everything. He was not gifted with the natural talents that some of the guys previously had had. I felt the same way, so we had a lot in common.
Grady thought 2 and 3 positions ahead. He was a coach on the field. The coaches just let him. He was a tremendous defensive player, and he knew how to play baseball.
Once he graduated in the spring of 1968, it was on to the Major League Draft. Grady was picked in the 12th round by the Atlanta Braves. A special day for the entire Little family.
It was total excitement, the whole family. You know, you make all those sacrifices growing up. You know, we didn't do things that a lot of the other guys did because we were on the baseball field trying to make ourselves better.
Grady Little had seen his hard work on the diamond pay off, but as he left Charlotte behind to pursue his dreams, he would discover his true calling as a leader.
Before the Bigs is brought to you by your local Southern California Hyundai dealers.
It is nearly a perfect day for Debbie Little here in Charlotte. Winter has subsided for autumn-like weather, and she can gleefully play with her 2 grandchildren. It's been 35 years since that young minor league baseball player named Grady Little strolled into her life at the Jamco drugstore just down the street.
My dad told me about this blonde over there in the drugstore, so I took a drive over, you know, looking for some aftershave lotion or something, but mostly I went to check her out.
He had the best legs, and they were those catcher's legs with those big quads, and that, I mean, right away I'm like, this guy's an athlete, he looks good.
I started dating her for a couple of days, a few times, and then my family had a barbecue at their house, and I showed up there with this girl. And my dad kind of pulled me to the side. He said, that's not the one I was talking about. But here it is 35 years later, and everything turned out pretty good from that trip to the drugstore that day.
Grady and Debbie would marry in 1971, just as Grady was moving through the Braves organization. It was the start of a life on the move for the new Mrs. Little.
I really didn't even know what minor league baseball meant. I mean, really, I was as rookie as you can be about it. But once I understood that, you know, it was moving away and that sort of thing, it starts to hit you. It really does.
What also hit them as Grady made it through the back roads as a minor leaguer was the realization that his days as a player were numbered.
He'll tell you that his bat was the fastest bat in the Eastern League, that he was the fastest to go to the plate and make an out and get his bat back in the rack, is the way he put it.
I couldn't hit. I couldn't hit water if I fell out of a boat, to tell you the truth, but I could catch and throw and handle pitchers, and that was it. Pretty much got me to wherever I went in baseball.
I think he saw the reality of what was happening around him.
If I wanted to do anything in this game further than where I was right there in AA baseball, then I was going to have to look at it from a little bit different angle.
He loved baseball so much. His feeling was, what can I do to be a part of this? And people had mentioned to him that he had a nice, relaxing way and that he worked well as a catcher. He was working well with the pitcher, so they saw that right away. And I think that's where the bug sort of hit him, that maybe I can possibly be a coach somewhere.
In 1974, Grady Little received his first coaching position, working in the Yankees farm system. But just as it seemed he was on his way up, George Steinbrenner took over the Bronx Bombers and would bring in his own people.
My name was kind of dropped in the file somewhere because he had his ideas about what he wanted to do, and so I guess to make a long story short, I was probably the first manager he ever fired, and he didn't even know it.
It was a tough time. So when you're looking to feed your family and decide what you're going to do, you just kind of have to go with what's going to work for you at that time.
With no baseball jobs being offered, Grady took his wife and his young son Eric back to his home state of Texas and back into a world he knew as a child, but now knew so little about.
We decided to go into the cotton farming business down in Texas.
When he was a teenager, there were weekends where he would go and plow fields and help his dad and his uncle with the farm that they had. So he knew that lifestyle.
This field right here behind us, where he raised the first bell made in Robertson County, I picked it for him.
Hugh Wallace lived on the farm right next to Grady's in Mumford, right outside of College Station.
This is the cotton. It's got some leaf trash in it and a few burrs. Yeah, this is what he was raising.
We had the most fun because it was amazing. We're sort of an outsider because a lot of people who lived there had farmed all their lives there, and their family had farmed there. So it was kind of unusual for somebody to come in from North Carolina and say, we're going to farm.
While the Littles were enjoying their quiet life in this home in nearby Hearn, they would soon find the struggles that face many farmers by the Brazos River.
There's a lot of gambling involved there. You're gambling against Mother Nature. The weather's got to be good, and the expense of growing one bale of cotton is very, very high. There was just way too much gambling for me.
Some larger corporations were buying farms, so we started seeing that the smaller farms were kind of going by the wayside. And that's, what we kind of started seeing as we were farming is like, well, it's not quite what we thought it was going to be.
Meanwhile, Grady couldn't escape the baseball bug, especially when his brother suited up to play at nearby Texas A&M. You could usually find him sitting in the stands at Olson Field thinking about the game.
It was not just Texas A&M, it was the youth fields around our community there that we were doing this farming in. I couldn't stay away from those. I was always involved in something to do with baseball.
He got to feel a part of what baseball was and what it meant to him, and it really kind of tugged at his heartstrings, and before long, what we decided to do was to try to make an attempt to get back into baseball.
After 5 years in Texas, Grady Little would be ready to trade in the farm for the farm leagues. A life in the minors called, a life in the state he once called home. Welcome to the home of America's favorite minor league baseball team, at least their old home. This is Durham Athletic Park, the longtime dilapidated confines for the Durham Bulls. And for 3.5 seasons between 1988 and 1991, this was the home park for an up-and-coming manager named Grady Little.
He had tremendous personality, and I think he began to win over the fans in Durham, even back in his days as the Hagerstown manager and then the manager in Kinston, because he always had a great repartee with the fans along the third baseline here in the old ballpark.
Grady had become something of a Southern legend since he traded in managing his Texas farm for managing ball clubs. He started with the Orioles organization in 1980 and quickly found success at Single A Hagerstown. It was a sweet start, but hardly a lucrative one.
I was doing something I loved to do, and we were able to get by with the support of my family and a wife who didn't mind working to help us make ends meet. While I'm doing this job that I love so much, this is all part of it, and it wouldn't have been able to happen otherwise.
In 1983, Grady was promoted to manage the Double-A Charlotte Knights, an exciting opportunity to work in the city where he grew up. He started the '84 season in the same capacity, but that didn't last long.
They got off to a really bad start, and then they swapped managers between their Hagerstown franchise, which was the Class A Carolina League team, and so Grady got sent down, which is not usually a good thing in somebody's career.
Things do happen, it was the first indication to me in this area of the business that things do happen, and a lot of times they're not totally in your control.
I've never been a fan of roller coasters, but that's a baseball life for you. You feel like you're climbing up that hill, and then all of a sudden you get a little dip.
It was a trying time, and I can remember them talking, and there was some talk about possibly leaving the game.
Grady would be reassigned back to Hagerstown, but he would quit after just 4 days on the job.
At that point in time, I was 34 years old, and I guess I could have been accused of over-evaluating my own skills. I don't know. I knew in my heart that I could go somewhere else very quickly.
We kind of came to terms, and that was his love and his desire is to keep plugging on, and that's the route he took.
That route would lead him to Kinston, North Carolina, the Blue Jays Single A team in 1985, and while it was a lateral move, it was a step back in the right direction.
It's one of those things where you have to be patient and let time take its effect, and he had to take a step back, put his life on hold, get his act together, and it was something that was out of his control, and he bounced back from it.
Grady bounced into the Braves organization in 1986, where Matt West was already a rising prospect who took a liking to the new coach at spring training.
This was a guy who really knew his own mind and knew how to make decisions and knew how to lead a group of people. And again, every year you'd have players coming to spring training speaking volumes about what it was like the year before when they got a chance to play for Grady.
That reputation put him on the road to Durham midway through the '88 campaign. The Braves reorganized their managers, and Grady landed as the skipper of the Single-A Bulls. The local media were immediately intrigued by the unique newcomer.
You know, that accent, we've never been able to figure it out exactly what it is. It sounds like it's part Cajun and part Southern, and we know he's from Texas, but he doesn't really sound Texan either.
If he doesn't do your job out there, some of these hitters in this BP, they'll give him a tongue lashing.
Not much has changed here at Durham Athletic Park since then either.
First door was the old umpire's dressing room. Then you had the visitors' clubhouse, the home hub clubhouse, and then at the very, very end, you had the manager's office, and that manager's office was actually built just before Grady took over, and it's at the very end, a windowless cubicle down there with lockers for the managers and 2 coaches.
Despite his narrow quarters, Grady took to Durham like the town took to him.
Durham was such a fun place to go. I mean, you go and there are thousands of people at a minor league ballpark.
It was a point in time where we would outdraw the team in Atlanta. I mean, that wasn't a good sign back then.
I can remember I was probably an early part of my teen years and hearing, hey, you know, your dad could run for mayor around here and probably win, hands down.
He understood North Carolina people. He was one of us in a sense. But I think anybody with a personality like Grady's, he's going to be successful wherever he goes.
He was a player's manager, but he was also a guy that developed players to be winning players, not just to be skill players. You know, his players went to the big leagues ready to win ball games, and I think you'll hear that a lot from people.
Grady Little had proved he could deliver players to the big leagues, but the question remained, could he deliver himself to the highest level? A random visit from Hollywood would help deliver much-needed exposure for this anonymous winner.
Before the Bigs is brought to you by your local Southern California Hyundai dealers and Jack in the Box.
Oh, now we got that lefty out here. We do some hammering now.
Dodgertown, Florida, 2006, and Grady Little is soaking in the sunshine. New to Dodger Blue, he already looks right at home, just as he did as the manager of the Durham Bulls in the late 80s and early 90s, about the same time that Hollywood came to North Carolina.
I was the manager of that ball club when Ron Shelton brought his crew in there and shot the movie Bull Durham, and it was quite an experience for me because it was the first time in dealing with something like that and seeing how it operated.
Grady served as a technical advisor for the movie with the players, the actors who were playing players, and some real players who came in to play bit parts in that as well.
To get the fact across that Tim Robbins could throw hard with that delivery was our #1 concern.
He was an opposing manager in a couple scenes, but I think they all got left on the cutting room floor.
While Grady's big screen debut never came, his influence can still be seen all over the baseball classic.
And when you look at some of the pranks that were pulled in there, I'm sure Grady probably had some input into what was realistic and what was not.
Robert Wall, when he walks up to the mound and he starts asking about the China pattern and that sort of thing, that's Grady in a nutshell. You know, if there's tension out there, how am I going to go out there and diffuse it with humor?
Bull Durham became a huge hit and helped the Bulls become the first Class A team ever to top 300,000 fans in a single season in 1990. But the following season, the fans' favorite manager was ready for a promotion.
Late in that season, everybody kind of had a gut feeling that was going to be it, that he was going up. I remember that there were a lot of tributes from fans and things like that. A whole group of them went and presented him things on the field. There was a lot of sadness around here.
The years that he spent in Durham, he needed those years. His resume got built. You know, if he wasn't here for all those years, maybe he wasn't the guy that was here for Bull Durham getting shot. So everything for a good reason.
In 1992, after years of succeeding in anonymity, Grady finally got a high-profile position and made the most of it. He was assigned to Double-A Greenville, along with many of the Braves' top prospects, including Chipper Jones and Javi Lopez. What followed was one of the greatest seasons in minor league baseball history, with the team going 142. Grady was named Baseball America's Minor League Manager of the Year, and suddenly the future was in sight.
I think that's probably the year where you start thinking maybe this is going to get some attention, maybe this will, you know, get you noticed and maybe open those doors up in the major league. So that definitely was the year that we did talk about it and think that possibly it was around the corner.
I knew it was a long way down the road, and I knew that the mountain was very steep to climb to try to reach a goal like that. So I kept my goals kind of achievable. You don't assume anything in the game of baseball.
While he was assuming little, he was achieving lots, getting bumped up to AAA Richmond in '93 and then winning the International League Championship in '94. In '96, his brother's childhood friend, Bruce Bochy, was managing the Padres. He called on Grady to be his big league bullpen coach.
I'll be thankful all the rest of my life for him giving me that chance, because it's tough. It's tough for a guy, no matter how many years you spend in the minor leagues as a manager. It's a tough road to climb, and he made it easier.
6 years later, the dream was completed with a press conference naming him as the manager of the Boston Red Sox. A special moment he shared with his wife the night before.
He calls about 11-something at night, and he says, "I'm not supposed to call you. I'm not supposed to call anybody until in the morning, but you know I'm going to call you and tell you that I got the job." So here I am, in the dark, by myself, nobody to share it with until it's made news, and was just so happy and so proud for him to get that opportunity.
I was thrilled. He finally made it to the big show.
This was like one of our friends being elected president. I mean, this was a big deal. As Grady often says, there's only 32 jobs like that. You know, there's 100 senators.
I don't think I ever heard Grady Little ever doubt that at some point in time he was going to get to the big leagues as a coach or a manager.
It may sound kind of corny, but just never give up on your dreams. Just keep battling and keep trying, and good things will happen.
Well deserved. Everybody knows he had no favors handed to him. He came through the ranks. He did pay his dues. He did have tough times. And through it all, he's persevered.
Bill Little never got to see his son make it to the big leagues as he passed in 1995. But he did live to see a life story carved out of his own tale. A man who loved the game, traveled many miles for it, and was willing to do whatever it took to share his passion.
You know, that puts chills on you, because my dad would have, that's just unbelievable, the feeling that he would have had to have been sitting in my seat or knowing it, but he knows.